Six Characters in Search of an Author is an Italian play by Luigi Pirandello, first staged in 1921. It is an absurdist, meta-theatrical work that delves into the complex relationship between authors, fictional characters, and theater professionals. The play famously employs the theater within the theater technique, blurring the boundaries between illusion and reality. Pirandello's innovative approach significantly influenced later dramatists, particularly those associated with the theater of the absurd, including Samuel Beckett, Eugene Ionesco, and Jean Genet, as well as writers like Jean Anouilh and Jean-Paul Sartre. Let us just dive into the text now. The play opens by breaking traditional theatrical norms. As the audience arrives, the curtain is already up, revealing a typical daytime stage setup. Several performers, playing the roles of theater actors, are casually present on stage, as they might be, during an actual rehearsal. Soon the manager enters, and announces that a rehearsal is about to begin. The play they are rehearsing is the second act of another work by Luigi Pirandello, named The Rules of the Game. Now, you might get a bit confused here, because here lies the absurdity of theater within the theater. The actors, in the name of performance, are just casually rehearsing another play of the playwright, and they are doing it in front of the spectators, who have come to see the play. All of a sudden the doorkeeper interrupts the rehearsal, and informs the director that there are some people outside who want to see him. The tenuous light announces the arrival of the six characters. Among them are the 50-year-old father, the mother, the 18-year-old stepdaughter, the 22-year-old son, a 14-year-old frightened boy, and a 4-year-old little girl who does not speak. Now, the father and mother have a complicated relationship. To understand the play first we need to understand the relationship between them. The mother has one son from the father, and the other children are from her later husband who is dead now. It is quite complicated because the characters are anonymous, they do not have any names. The father steps forward, and declares that they have arrived, in search of an author, offering the bewildered manager a drama to stage. A debate follows about whether the characters are insane, or whether the madness lies within the theater itself. The father insists that he and his family are characters by nature, created, but never written into a complete work by their author. They are filled with a story, a drama, they are desperate to express. To demonstrate, the stepdaughter suddenly starts performing. She reveals she has recently become an orphan, hints at a disturbing emotional entanglement with the father, and then unexpectedly bursts into a French song and dance. She explains that the son, the only legitimate child of the mother and father, despises the rest of the family. The father discloses that the mother's former partner is the biological father of the stepdaughter, the 14-year-old boy, and the little girl. He has recently passed away. This is why the mother and stepdaughter are dressed in mourning. He admits that he himself had sent the mother to live with the clerk because he believed she was emotionally unresponsive, describing her as deaf, mentally deaf. He chose to raise only their son, but over time became curious about the family he had left behind. He began visiting them again, at one point even giving gifts to the stepdaughter at school, until they eventually moved away permanently. After the clerk's death, the mother and stepdaughter were forced to support themselves. The mother worked as a seamstress at Madame Pace's shop, while the stepdaughter was pushed into prostitution. Now, the question remains, who is this Madame Pace? She, on the surface, is a owner of a fashion house, but she runs a brothel. Madame Pace is the stepdaughter's exploitative madam. She is an old fat woman. She employed the mother as a dressmaker, and the stepdaughter as a prostitute. One day, the father unknowingly, or possibly knowingly, encountered the stepdaughter at the brothel. However, it is not clear whether he realized who she was, and whether the mother intervened in time or arrived too late. As the argument continues, the focus shifts to the son, who remains distant, and refuses to express any emotions. He describes himself as an unrealized character, suggesting that he lacks depth or purpose in their story. Recognizing the dramatic potential of the family's tale, the director offers to help them find a writer, who could turn it into a play. However, the characters insist that the director must become their author. They want him to watch them perform their story and record it, scene by scene. The director agrees, and he and the characters leave the stage to discuss the details in his office, leaving the actors puzzled and creating a pause before the start of Act 2. Don't get confused here with the characters and actors. The characters are those 6 who came to the director, and the actors were those who worked for the theater, those who were about to rehearse a play when these 6 intervened. Then the stepdaughter insists that the setting must accurately replicate Madame Pace's shop. The director tells the prompter to record the characters' behavior in shorthand and instructs the actors to observe them closely, so they can later portray them. Now, here lies a confusion. The actors of the theater think that they need to observe the characters, so that they can play their role. But, on the other hand, the characters don't want their roles to be played by others. They inform the director that they are live characters and they will do their own role. The father here basically draws a line between the actors and characters. The director disagrees, saying that characters aren't capable of performing like professional actors. The father and stepdaughter mock the actors chosen to play them. Then they realize a problem. Madame Pace, an essential figure in their story, is missing. To summon her, the father begins preparing the stage, hanging up hats and mantles belonging to the actresses. To everyone's surprise, Madame Pace suddenly appears in the theater and walks onto the stage. The father challenges the actors and the director, accusing them of having a narrow understanding of truth. Meanwhile, the stepdaughter and Madame Pace begin rehearsing their scene quietly in a corner, refusing to speak loudly until the father leaves. Madame Pace starts speaking to the stepdaughter about an upcoming client, but her speech causes everyone to laugh. She speaks in a humorous, broken mix of English and Italian. Highlighting the play's self-aware nature, the director comments that her awkward dialogue adds comic relief to an otherwise intense and uncomfortable moment. Now, you must remember that all these things are happening in front of the audience. They are arguing and rehearsing in front of the audience, and basically, it is the play. Madame Pace tells the stepdaughter that an old gentleman is coming to see her, at which point, the mother suddenly lashes out, calling Pace a murderess, and tries to attack her. The actors hold her back, and Madame Pace quickly leaves the stage. The director interrupts the characters and instructs the actors to start reenacting the scene. As the leading man and leading lady clumsily perform their roles, the father and stepdaughter laugh at the poor imitation. The stepdaughter interjects, correcting how the events really happened. However, the director refuses to include the implication of a sexual encounter between her and the father, saying that the theater allows truth only up to a point. The stepdaughter protests, accusing the director of helping the father hide his wrongdoing. Because if they do not perform the actual scene, it will be of no use. The stepdaughter then describes how she ended up in a situation with the father, expressing her shame, and begins performing it on stage. Just as things intensify, the mother rushes in and stops the scene. The manager, pleased with the dramatic impact, quietly says, "Curtain here, curtain," intending it as a cue to end the act. But the technician misunderstands and immediately lowers the actual stage curtain, cutting the scene short. These small things kind of works as comic relief. The conversation then shifts into another debate between the director and the father. They argue about the nature of characters versus actors, questioning whether the theater reflects reality or is merely make-believe. The discussion escalates into a philosophical disagreement about identity and existence. The father claims that characters, unlike actors, are eternal and unchanging. The director, being frustrated, tells the father to stop overanalyzing, and calls it absurd for him to believe he's a character created by an author. But the father insists he's not philosophizing, he's simply expressing the source of his pain. He explains that he and his family were indeed conceived by an author's imagination, but were never fully brought to life. Now, the director has the power to give them stage life. In the end, the characters and the director agree that the final scene will take place in the garden, which the stage is already prepared for. The director begins directing the boy, trying to coach him on how to perform his role. Meanwhile, The son attempts to leave, but the stepdaughter stops him. The son refuses to act out a painful scene with the grieving mother, who insists it actually happened. The other characters try to pressure the son into participating, but he accuses the father of trying to rewrite their story to suit himself, as if taking the place of the original author. The manager asks the son to explain what really happened. Hesitantly, the son begins recounting the tragic events. As he speaks, the manager notices the child has drowned in the fountain. The son describes the boy's eyes as wild and disturbed. Then, a gunshot is heard from behind the trees, and the boy's lifeless body is dragged out by the actors. Everyone is stunned, unsure whether what they've just witnessed is real or just part of the play. The father insists it is real, but the director, overwhelmed by the confusion between reality and performance, shouts, "To hell with it all." And the curtain falls, the play ends. If this video helped you in any ways, consider subscribing the channel. Thanks for watching.